Welcome to CMO Confidential, the podcast that takes you inside the drama, decisions, and choices that go with being the head of marketing. Hosted by five-time CMO Mike Linton.
Welcome, marketers, advertisers, and those who love them to Chief Marketing Officer Confidential. CMO Confidential is a program that takes you inside the drama, the decisions, and the politics that go with being the head of marketing at any company in what is one of the most scrutinized jobs in the executive suite. I'm Mike Linton, the former Chief Marketing Officer of Best Buy, eBay, Farmers Insurance, and Ancestry.com, here today with my guest, Kate Bullis. Today's topic, a top search executive's view of tech, marketing, and the marketplace. Now, Kate is a global marketing and revenue practice leader and managing director of ZRG Partners, a global top 10 talent advisory company. She probably has one of the longest business cards in the world as well. Now, she has been in executive search her entire career and handles about 20 to 25 marketing assignments annually. Full disclosure, I've known Kate for a number of years. She is a champion of marketing and the marketing function. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you for having me, Mike.
All right, let's just jump into it. Let's talk about the job market overall. We've heard from a lot of listeners that the market is slow and there aren't a lot of jobs out there right now. Share your thoughts with us on the marketplace.
Yeah, well, clearly I do want to make sure that I'm clear on the market that I'm aware of, right? The market that I really deal with is at the executive level. So when I look at the difference between the number of opportunities that are in the market today as compared to a year ago, 3 years ago, I'm speaking from that perspective. And the reality is there are fewer roles than certainly 22 and 21.
Yeah.
But I would argue that 21 and 22, 2021 and 22, were absolutely bananas. And the closest thing that I have seen in the market since the high 90s and 2000 era. And those days were not sustainable either, just like 21 and 22 and parts of 23 were not sustainable. And so I would argue that what we have seen is a bit of a correction, certainly not a recession. And I would also say that when I look at the number of engagements that we're working on right now, as compared to 2 years ago or last year, it's almost identical.
So if I look, I hear you saying, correct me if I'm wrong, that if you look over the marketplace over time, it's pretty much stable. It just had a big pull forward, then a drop off, and now it's back to normal. Is that a fair way to look at it?
If we can say whatever normal is, right? But yes, That is what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we have to keep in mind that in 21 and 22, we were on this massive growth trajectory, basically mostly because of a reaction to a global pandemic.
Yeah.
And we saw valuations escalate to the point of ridiculousness in many occasions.
It was crazy. It was crazy time.
And we saw growth at all costs and not so much the worry of profit. And so those things we've corrected. That's all. And this is healthy.
Okay, let's flip over to the B2B space. I know you do a huge amount of work in B2B and you're sitting in the center of tech land in NorCal. One of our early guests said, aside from cybersecurity and AI, you can make a case that the B2B marketplace is in a bit of a recession. I think you may disagree with that, but tell all our listeners what's going on in the B2B marketplace, not just the overall jobs marketplace.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. So I understand why that perception might be the case, the perception of cybersecurity and AI keeping the lights on for B2B. And I wouldn't disagree that those are white hot areas in B2B. But my personal, I look at my current portfolio of work. One of the CMO searches that we're leading right now is decidedly AI, and we just completed one in that category as well. The other CMO and VP marketing searches that we're leading right now across the country are all but one are B2B. And none of them are in cybersecurity.
So is B2B making a comeback, or what's going on? Because they got hammered by the valuation.
So here's what's happening.
Yeah.
And it's age old. It has nothing to do with this moment in time. And that is that enterprise technology and B2B companies in general are always in need of CMOs. And it's not just because of the perception that the CMO is constantly being churned out every 24 months or 36 months. It's because companies in transition, companies in transformation always need newness in marketing. And that sometimes translates into a new CMO. And what I mean by that specifically is a company that is now going from a moment in time from growth to scale, I would argue, is a candidate for a new leadership for new leadership in marketing. A company that is expanding its market base, its segments, for example, or its verticals. A company that's wildly expanding on its products and its offering from, say, single product to platform. These are all companies that have new leadership, ownership, companies that are transitioning from, say, venture capital backed to private equity to publicly traded. These are all representative moments in time that we see new leadership in marketing become necessary. And as long as those things remain the case, you can always expect technology and B2B companies to be hiring.
That is such an interesting perspective, which what you just said is the companies, as they grow up, they have to get what they need. And there's enough of a diversity of CMO types that you can't, one size doesn't fit all. You have to go get the type right for you.
That is exactly the case. And it has nothing to do with domain.
Okay, that is super interesting. Look, we're talking about B2B right now, and everyone went through the revaluation, a bunch of tech companies cut headcount. Can you tell us the difference you're seeing between the public, private, and venture cap companies and how the CMO job slides in to those types of positions?
Sure. So I think the first part of your question is just about venture. So those are three categories. And
I know. It was a super long and complicated question, so you can take it apart and put it back together as you see fit.
So I would say that first of all, I'll state the obvious. When the market started to correct, 2022 and in the beginning of 2023, venture capital backed earlier stage companies suffered fastest and most. Right. These are the companies that are they're much closer to the bone, so to speak. And so we saw squeezing. They're not profitable necessarily. They're still trying to go from growth to scale. You have a lot less cash to burn. And so we saw what we predicted to see, which was the venture capital backed companies suffered fastest.
Yeah.
Private equity has really come into a new era when it comes to what we see as far as the amount of hiring going on, not just in marketing, but I can speak specifically in the role of marketing and say private equity is really evolving. And because they're behaving in a way that they were not behaving 10 years ago. There's a lot more hiring of leadership going on in private equity-backed companies, and I can go into why that is.
Why is that? Well, I must know.
Okay, so first of all, the craft of marketing is a craft of growth and customer facing. That's what marketing is all about. And so it's important to call out that distinction. 10 and 20 years ago, private equity largely acted like a business that was great at picking up companies, making big investments, and often, historically, squeezing their way to profitability or adding companies, putting companies together, but always trying to get that profitability and valuation up.
Yeah, it's all about margin. It's not about, yeah.
So 10 years ago, I couldn't even tell you if I was doing very much in the world of CMO with private equity companies, because most of the CMOs that I think highly of didn't want to be associated with a world of squeezing their way to the answer. They wanted to be a part of growing their way to an answer. And that's what great marketing does and should do. And so I did very little now over when I look at my current, and this is true for easily the last 2 years, the majority of my search work is with private equity. And that's because private equity itself now, not exclusively.
Not all of it, definitely not all of it.
You still got to be careful, right? There's still plenty of private equity companies that I would argue are not the kind of private equity companies that really hire a lot of CMOs, because they're still acting in those more traditional ways. But I seek out opportunities to work with private equity companies that would probably call themselves growth equity.
So are you actually saying here that a bunch of private equity companies are having a marketing renaissance? Is that fair? Can I say that?
I wouldn't call it a marketing renaissance. I'd call it a growth renaissance.
All right, I'll go with growth renaissance. I just want to get my renaissance comment in there because I really like it.
You really like that word.
Yeah. Hey, one of the things, you're talking about all the private equity changes, what's going on, and public companies. Anything to report there?
Yes. So public, I would say that at any given time, the majority of my portfolio is private equity and publicly traded. Those are predominantly the clients that I serve most. Although the practice that I am a part of, the marketing and growth practice at ZRG, is predominantly private equity. And so what I would say about the publicly traded companies is they are as front and center examples of what I was saying earlier about transformation and transition as the private equity world. And so that's the reason why we continue to do so much in that world.
That is super helpful. And I want to follow on with anybody interviewing for these jobs, because one of the things we also hear from our listeners is a belief that searches are taking longer and companies are putting candidates through a lot more interviews. Sometimes they make them write it, do a project. Is that true in your world? And if so, what's driving that?
The first answer is yes, it is true. And the second answer is the good news, bad news.
Okay, I'll take the good news first.
So the good news is the reason why. It translates into ultimately very good news for CMOs, not just for businesses. The reason why I would argue that we're seeing cycle times extend past 90 days in the B2B world, there's never any one reason, but I have seen this play out quite a bit in the last couple of years. And that is the expectation of what marketing does for the company has really evolved and expanded on behalf of the CEO and the board, as well as the peer group to the CMO in the B2B world. I have seen the firsthand the change that has taken place, particularly in the world of enterprise technology, that expectations have finally begun to match what great CMOs want to be expected for. And so that's why this is good news. It translates into a tougher process.
Is that the bad news, that the process takes longer and is harder, or is there more bad news?
It is the only bad news, in addition to that, is that the expectations rise, and so too does responsibility. We can talk about this if we've got time for it, but I would argue all day long that the role of the CMO is now more diverse and expanded than any other position in the C-suite outside of maybe the CEO itself.
Let's talk about that.
That alone is both the good and the bad news for the CMO.
I wish you had some passion about this. Let's talk about, you just touched on it. your view on the value of marketing and the fact that more people are starting, or more companies are starting to get it. Tell us about how you are seeing marketing evolve, and then we're gonna go down that a little further. So
I would argue that, again, I'm speaking from the B2B world now,
sure.
and in particular, a majority of my work is in the world of enterprise technology. And I would say that 20 years ago, when I was really beginning the journey of focusing on marketing search work in this world, I saw a lot of the kind of behavior that was very common back then, which was marketing was an afterthought. The world was really focused on sales and product. Yeah. And marketing was just, let's just put some lipstick on it as it leaves the building.
Yeah.
And it was not really perceived in any wide capacity as a must-have. It was a nice to have. And I was doing a lot of, educating in my mind on what it could be and what my clients were missing if they kept that very narrow view. And I'm glad to say I'm not the reason why these things have changed, why companies have evolved, but I am very happy to say that the evolution of that thinking is today. It is now. And I am not making the arguments for the sheer width and power of great marketing like I used to have to.
So that is very, very encouraging. I know you also think a lot of boards in particular, need a marketer. Can you talk about that?
Oh, yeah. So you're not seeing nearly enough of it as I think we all should. But I mean, I think the evolution of boards is just it's an age-old story, right? We about 20 years ago or so, we started seeing the conversation about the diversification of boards really pick up as a subject. That alone was a great moment. But a lot of the diversity that we were hearing about was diversity of gender, diversity of age, not necessarily diversity of skill. That had to follow for some reason. And frankly, I have been saying for quite some time, great companies recognize that diversity, if you look at a board and you can see the reflection of that board in the C-suite, that ultimately becomes a very diverse board in other ways as well, and much more powerful as far as company results. I advocate not just for at least one marketing background in the boardroom, and the reason for that is knowledge of the customer.
Yeah.
But I also advocate for where's your risk management, including things like cybersecurity in the boardroom.
Yeah.
Where is your HR leadership in the boardroom? It can't all be CEOs and CFOs.
We at CMO Confidential agree completely with you. Are still shocked by how few marketers are on the board, given how big of a spend it is for so many businesses and how important it is to understand the marketplace, the consumer, and the growth story for the company.
And let's face it, consumerization alone is a prime reason why product companies, technology companies can't afford to get away with just thinking that our product will sell itself and we have a great sales force and that's why we're growing.
Tell us what you mean exactly by consumerization.
The market itself is the boss. That's why. The consumer will either champion you or eat you alive. And your products can only last. So the wonderful product that addresses a big problem, I get it. Lots of companies live on that for quite some time. And they can also live on maximization of a sales channel, regardless of what that channel is. But it won't be long before there's a difference between surviving and thriving. And the thriving will come long-term, will come because of great marketing.
We agree with this totally here. Obviously, we're doing the show, but
that consumerization, the market will eat you for breakfast.
Well, the other thing, the market, the consumer tells you, the consumer is the boss of everything here, and they really trigger it. And
I
what
use
you
the
don't
word
want,
market,
and I'm going to I want to go right into this because we've done a couple shows about the difference between believers and non-believers, particularly in the C-suite and at the board level. And a lot of our guests have singled out tech companies or B2B companies as marketing non-believers. And what you just mentioned when you said why they don't do marketing, because they think this is a great product. All you have to do is put it out there. We'll just buy search words and they'll buy it forever. So when people are interviewing, how do they decide? What recommendations would you give them to decide this company is actually going to let me drive a growth agenda and let me drive innovation and help with the entire marketplace approach, or they're just going to ask me to help the Salesforce sell stuff? What questions should candidates ask if they're in this situation where they're trying to say, does this company really believe, or are they just talking about it?
Right. Well, first of all, I really appreciate the word believe, although I hate it.
Okay.
We're not talking about faith here. We're not talking about either I believe in Santa Claus or I don't. This is hard and fast stuff. This is all we have to do is point to examples in the market of what a difference maker great marketing is. And so I would argue that instead of thinking about the question of does this company believe in the power of marketing or doesn't it, I would start actually with the bar even lower than that and say, how does this company make decisions for all the functions every day, and then take it up to the next level, which is, and how does that translate to marketing? Learn about the history of marketing in this company. Learn about the history of what has come before and what went well and what didn't go well and why. And then move forward and say, what really is what will success look like 3 years from now for this company, not in marketing, for this company? What is the end game that we're trying to pursue? And then you want to back into how that translates into how the company thinks marketing should participate in that goal. And you want to ask the CEO, you want to ask certainly the chief product and the head of revenue, those two officers. At the very least, I always say in the world of B2B, there are 3 horsemen: marketing, sales, and product. Yeah. And if you don't have alignment among those 3, and of course with your CEO, this is going to be a long haul. So there's got to be a real understanding of what the expectation is of marketing towards those larger goals, those business goals. And is there an alignment between what the CMO has historically been able to do in past companies and what this company is trying to do? Do we see a little bit of a pattern match there? And then more importantly than pattern matching is, does this CMO demonstrate the mindset that this company needs in order to reach those goals? And when I say mindset, I'm talking about don't come to the table with answers. Come to the table with great questions. And if a company thinks that you should be showing up with all the answers, that's a yellow flag.
Yeah. I think that's really good advice. The only thing I would put in there is I'd emphasize your first point, which is how do decisions get made, and does the CMO have control, or is the CMO actually overridden by the rest of the C-suite in the voting?
Well, this is what I say. Is the marketing department a yes center?
Yeah.
Is this really just a function that listens to and responds to what the sales team needs, or what the product team is saying, or what the CFO is asking for? Or is this a function that actually has power enough to bring, I'm not saying that they should be what I say goes. What I'm saying is do you want a person who is first concerned about the market? Let's talk about our market. Let's talk about who that market is. What problem are we solving for here? And then bring the answers to those questions into the company and spread the word. If they can't influence that and they can't create a strategy, which is effectively the craft of marketing, what are we going to do about it? The ing in marketing, right? If you don't want a person who thinks that way, I would argue you're not looking for a CMO.
I agree with this. And the other thing, that's how you get fired. You're the yes center, and then you get a bunch of products that nobody wants to buy, and no one actually looks at the product as being crappy. And then it's your fault for not selling it. And I think you have to be the interface to the marketplace. I think that is fabulous advice. And I love don't be the yes center.
Don't be the yes. And I would also say, listen for little big things.
Give me an example of a little big thing.
So when I think there are two really great examples. Both of these companies are publicly traded. A few years ago, we led the CMO search for e.l.f. Beauty.
Yep.
And then more recently, we led the CMO search for CrowdStrike, cybersecurity. Mm-hmm. Two wildly different companies, two wildly different industries. Both CEOs had the same mandate. Both hired outstanding, massive game-changing CMOs. And it was because they both, among other things, said, we need to go bold. Uh-huh. Let's not just look for the pattern matching person who's seen this movie before, because pattern matching and playbooking, and my experience, especially in the last few years, has really come down in terms of what is right for the business. What is really right for the business is, are you willing to do even some risky things, provided that risk is being brought to the table by educated understanding of the market? What is the CMO doing to ensure that we really understand our customer? And then everything that looks risky suddenly doesn't look so risky. And then you also have to say, hats off to the CEO, board, and C-suite who says, if we don't go big, ultimately we're dead.
I think that's very helpful. I want to make sure, because also the idea of a playbook working in every company, in every industry is just, that's not how marketing works.
Followership.
The marketplace. I want to make sure we got the little big things out there, because is that the little big thing? Like you're looking for people that are really going.
Like a comment like, we need to go bold. Yeah. We don't want to be like everybody else in our competition set. We don't want to be a player. We want to be the category leader.
I like it. Thank you for that.
So I think that's a big one.
So let's flip over, and you've been doing searches for quite a while, and you've talked to lots of people and watched their careers. What's your advice to people out there that want to become CMOs and are listening to the show and thinking, all right, what do I have to do to even get a shot at one of these big jobs? And how should I be managing my career?
So I often find it interesting that marketers think about their careers separately from what they do for a living. And often I say, simply apply the great work that you do as a marketer to your own career. So rise above your own career and look down on it, just the way you would looking down on a market itself. How do I address this market and then do great marketing because of my understanding of this market? Do the same thing for your career. Recognize, look at the body of your work and seek out, not only are there patterns here of what I've loved doing and patterns here of what I've been particularly good at. Use those things to your advantage. And it's oftentimes, it's not like, oh, I'm really good at demand generation. or I'm really good at social, or I'm really good at product marketing. Those are departments.
Yes, they're not outcomes, they're features.
Right.
There you go.
And you should know that about yourself. If you grew up in demand gen and you've got a great reputation working with salespeople, then yes, you should be able to say that that's a superpower of yours. I'm saying more than that. I'm saying be really knowledgeable about, well, it turns out I didn't realize this, but I do a lot more in enterprise markets than I do in, say, SMB or mid-market. Is that something I want to continue to do, or do I want to get away from it? What about the motions that I'm most familiar with? Have I actually been really successful and enjoyed bringing companies to new segments, new market segments? Am I really good at the digital stuff versus the field and the events stuff? Find the patterns. And then finally, this is another big one, the qualitative stuff. What would others say about you when it comes to what you bring to the table every day? No matter what the conversation, no matter what the need, how do you behave? What would people say about what it's like working with you? Are you highly collaborative? Are you very decisive? These are some of the things that you should have when you're thinking about where should your next, position be? Where are you the most dangerous? Seek out companies that need those things, not just a great CMO.
Yes, don't be the yes center and know where you're the most dangerous. I love it. We are almost at time, so we have a traditional last question. It's a two-parter. You have to take at least one, but you can also take both. So, funniest story you can share on the air and or piece of practical advice we haven't already discussed that you want to share with our listeners. Please take one or both.
I'm gonna steer clear of the funniest story, but I will definitely share. I think that the piece of practical advice that I would offer is very akin to what I just said, because I think that it's true for whether you're seeking your next CMO opportunity or you're a company seeking a great CMO. And that is, don't simply pattern match against the quantitative stuff. Be very aware of what you bring to the table qualitatively. Be very aware of what your company needs. Qualitative just translates into culture. It simply translates into how do we do things around here. And if you understand the way you like to work and you're particularly good, and you can find those companies that seek you out as well. And those companies, I'm seeing more and more of it, companies truly recognize that a CMO is a leader first, a person who understands the business first, and then does marketing.
Yes.
And so that is it. Look for companies who think like that. And more of them do.
Yeah, we are 90% chief, 10% marketing. That's the CMO job. So
yeah, I would say the CMO job is leadership, inspiration, and then craft.
I like it. Kate, thank you very much. It was a great show. I really enjoyed it. And thanks to everyone for listening to CMO Confidential.
Thank you for having me.
If you are enjoying our show, please like, share, and subscribe, and look for all of our shows on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and the I Hear Everything Network, which include Marketing, the Battle Between Believers and Non-Believers, Parts 1, 2, and 3. Is the CMO job the hardest position in business? The case for customer lifetime value, why is this so hard? And is artificial intelligence an extinction event for agencies? Hey, all you marketers, stay safe out there. This is Mike Linton signing off for CMO Confidential.